Thank you for joining us in this third session about how to navigate this complex funding scenario. As you know, these sessions were a response of your request to get some ideas and inspiration to, well, overcome what is happening with the funding scenario globally. And we already have 2 sessions. This is our third session, and I have the pleasure to have today 3 of the people that I consider the main experts in cross-sectorial collaborations. The 3 of them has year of work with different stakeholders that are not necessarily the traditional stakeholder that we always work with in the social sector. So I'm going to introduce them, and I'm also going to give the floor to them to give us a few more or tell us a few more about themselves. I want to first introduce Catalina Cock. Catalina Cock is the president and co-founder of Fundación Sangre in Colombia. Catalina is an Ashoka Fellow, a social entrepreneur that has years developing impact projects, but also cross-sectorial collaborations. We also have today with us Gregg Behr. Gregg is the Executive Director of the Grable Foundation and one of the weavers of the Pittsburgh Learning ecosystem. He will tell us a little bit more about the work, but one of the most important things is that Gregg is part of the ecosystem and is also a founder, so he will give us the perspective from the foundations, but also as someone that is part of the cross-sectorial dialogue. And finally, we have a Tyler Santa. Tyler is the Executive Director of Remake Learning, another weaver of the Pittsburgh Impact Ecosystem. They will tell us a little bit today about what is an impact ecosystem, which is important of cross-sectorial collaboration, and how these cross-sectorial collaborations could be a way to get access to other sources of funding, and more importantly, to make our project sustainable. And I want to give the floor to Catalina. Catalina, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and Fundación Sangre. Welcome.
Thank you, Gabi, and hello, everyone. Happy to be here to share a little bit about our journey. We've been working for more than 19 years to unlock young people's potential to contribute to peace building in Colombia. Our model has evolved significantly. I'm very passionate about bringing improbable actors together to develop collaborative solutions. And we have some experience around this and would love to share a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Catalina. Gregg, can you tell us a little bit more about the Grable Foundation?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Gregg Behr. I'm coming to you from the corner of planet Earth called Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And among other things, I serve as the executive director of a private charitable foundation called the Grable Foundation, which focuses on the well-being of kids and learning, particularly kids who, for economic reasons, don't have the same opportunities as their peers. And most of our grant making is here in southwestern Pennsylvania. And I'm the chairperson for Remake Learning, of which Tyler Samstag is the executive director.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to give the floor to Tyler to tell us a little bit more about Remake Learning.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Gabi.
Tyler.
Thank you. So Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we are situated close to the east coast of the United States. And we are a city that has transitioned quite a bit over the last 50 years, transitioned from an industrial history of steel production. And when that industry declined in the 80s, it's a city that reinvented itself, specifically around higher education and more recently technology. And something really pointed to me is there are companies testing self-driving cars in Pittsburgh. And a teacher came up to me once and said, you know, this weekend I saw a self-driving car, and it just really reinforced I constantly need to be changing what I am doing in my classroom. And so as the technology changes rapidly, as the world around us changes rapidly, there's responsibility and opportunity to rethink learning. And so at the heart of what Remake Learning does is we bring folks together who are invested in the young people in the region to tackle some of the region's biggest problems. So we are, over 800 different organizations representing K-12 formal education, libraries, museums, but also higher ed, industry, in government as well.
Thank you, Tyler. And I want to start this conversation with Catalina. Cata, you had, as you say, 20 years of experience working in the social sector. You came, as many of us, from the background of the social sector organizations, social entrepreneurs, and NGO. We are more used to work with traditional funders, but you started a journey to diversify your source of funding years ago. And I wanted for you to share a little bit with our members how that journey happened. What did you find when you start collaborating with other actors that are not the traditional actors and funders that we are used to? And more importantly, how you start the dialogue with them.
Sure. Well, let me start by sharing a little bit more about our work so we can understand how we transitioned a little bit to the model we have. We work in almost every corner in Colombia, providing, or we started providing direct services to young people. And as the program was growing, of course, we saw the necessity to involve all the actors who influence young people's reality: teachers, parents, community leaders. So we did have a systems change approach from the early stages, and we started learning ecosystems with these actors involved in supporting young people becoming change agents to promote sustainable peace. But as we were growing and we were seeing, yes, we're achieving significant impact, but what if we involve other actors, maybe those that are less probable to be involved in this, to explore new ways of collaboration and to grow our programs or others more quickly. And that's when we started creating multi-sectoral multi-sectoral ecosystems, bringing together very diverse actors from the private sector, the public sector, different NGOs with different approaches to work together collaboratively. And we have seen important shifts in many senses, and that perhaps I can explain a little bit more. But going to your specific question, this collaboration and this journey of learning together and broadening our perspectives, understanding different views from different actors with regards to the problem we're tackling, but also with the way to provide solutions, invited us to think of alternative ways to fund our initiatives. I can mention some of them because there were actors involved, such as health insurance companies, another type of companies, for example, producers of motorcycles. It seemed totally disconnected, but we did find many ways to collaborate, and we're actually partners today with these companies, receiving funding from some of them to attend a specific issue around mental health, which is critical for violence prevention and for young kids to become change makers. About 5 years ago, we were 50% dependent on USAID, and that proportion has shifted significantly. It did affect us, and it does have an important impact, what just happened, but we have reduced that dependency to 8%. We also developed a consultancy unit based on our expertise on weaving these social labs for collaborative innovation. And we're collaborating with different companies around the country with these services and others that we developed based on all our learnings throughout these 19 years. But the most important thing is the impact that emerged from these collaborations. Through the process, we're seeing important shifts, not only around rebuilding the social fabric in a polarized world or country, amplifying the social capital and the connections and partnerships among different actors who are part of these learning ecosystems, but we're also shifting together our beliefs, our paradigms around different things. the role of young people in society, which is critical, of course, but many others that help us or that can evolve thanks to the collaboration and shared learning. And it's important to say as well that as a result of those learning ecosystems and those collaborations across sectors, really interesting projects, partnerships, and pathways to collaboration emerge. That we even lose control of those collaborations, but significant initiatives, for instance, around cross-mentoring and support programs, or a leadership school where civil society and the business sector collaborate to train young people as leaders, the creation of an independent media outlet where young people have an important role as journalists. Like many new initiatives emerge out of these collaborations.
Thank you, Catalina. And I want to ask you, Tyler, Catalina mentioned something that is very important, which is the fact that you are inviting different actors and you are establishing dialogues with people that is not normally the stakeholders that we work with. She mentioned a motorcycle company, and I know, because I have the opportunity of being with you in Pittsburgh, that the learning ecosystem in Pittsburgh also have a lot of companies involved, some of them really improbable. We have the opportunity of visiting a hospital, a previous hospital that is now a center for innovation, where you work with private companies. Can you tell us a little bit more on how you establish those cross-sectorial collaborations and what that means for the sustainability of the initiative?
Absolutely. That's a big question right there. You know, this concept of ecosystems seems to be such a hot topic in all kinds of industries. You know, we hear it in healthcare, we hear it in technology. But, you know, Pittsburgh is a mid-sized city, but it feels small. And so there's the potential for a lot of connections to exist in this region. And I think quite organically, when you get people in the same room and you start to talk about what you do, you can find areas of shared interest. And so that really is at the heart of what we do. From a strategy perspective, though, Remake Learning, we talk about what we do as stewarding an ecosystem or creating the conditions in our region for people to come together, to break down silos and find ways for people to work together. We do that through what we call our network support strategies. And so we call them our 5 C's. Our 5 C's guide everything that Remake Learning does in our region. And I'll go through these really quickly. But the first is that we convene. It's simple, but we create opportunities for people to come together on a regular basis. Oftentimes, these can be social events, opportunities for people to get to know one another on a personal and professional level. When that starts to happen, as I shared, topics of shared interest quite organically arise. If you bring 15 people together in a room today, I guarantee you folks are going to start talking about AI. There's a shared interest in AI, and it transcends all of the organizations and sectors of the folks who are in the room. And so when we start to recognize that there are these topics of shared interest, Remake Learning coordinates. That's our second strategy. So we bring people together to better understand who's doing what in the region, what gaps exist that we could collectively address, or where are there just like really promising practices that with a little bit of support we could catalyze. That leads to our third network support strategy, catalyze. And so when you bring people together and you invite them to dream, what if a roboticist from higher education and a third grade teacher who's teaching computer science came together on a project? What could be created? We provide grant funding, and a lot of times it's quite small grant funding, just enough to test something. And so that's catalytic grant funding to bring ideas to life. Our fourth one is we communicate. So as we start to see things shift, as we start to see successes, we capture it through videography, through photography, through written stories, and we share broadly so other people could be inspired by and can replicate this in their own environment. And then lastly, we celebrate. Education, like we have to, it is a joyful profession. And so we find time to celebrate success on a regular basis. And we do so quite intentionally. And so that's kind of how we create these conditions. And our ecosystem truly is anybody who is invested in the well-being of young people in Pittsburgh. And so it might be a tech startup who's interested in leveraging AI as a learning tool. It could be research coming out of higher ed who's interested in creating a new tool for a STEM classroom, for example. And the ecosystem provides them an opportunity to make those vital connections at key points in their development, in their organization's development.
Thank you, Tyler. That's great. Greg, I want to ask you from the perspective of the funders, because when we mention this kind of cross-sectorial collaboration or this initiative where the funders come and dedicate time to just share, learn, being part of the community, many people think that that doesn't exist. And in our experience, we have seen more and more funders and more business leaders that are interested and dedicating time to go to the communities to learn, to understand. I want to hear a little bit from your perspective as a funder, how you see this cross-sectorial collaboration and which is your perspective of these cross-sectorial dialogues.
Well, let's start by thinking of funders just as neighbors, right? If schools are neighbors and the museums are neighbors and the businesses are neighbors, funders are merely neighbors. You heard Tyler describe that there are 800 schools, museums, libraries, campuses of higher ed involved in Remake Learning, and that includes funders. Funders are part of that neighborhood mix. And we often say in the context of Remake Learning that there are many front doors, and every single organization that participates, whether it's a funder like the one I represent, or a school or a museum, they all have self-interests. And so I think it's particularly important as we think about the fundraising and the financial vitality of this work, to think about not only the altruism, but maybe more importantly, the self-interest. Because as a funder, we're only successful to the extent that we're privileged to be able to support organizations achieving meaningful results. And you can imagine that we have our own self-interest in the world. You heard me describe our focus is kids and learning, particularly kids who, for economic reasons, don't have the same opportunities as their peers. And so a funder like the one I represent gets pretty excited when, for example, a business and a museum and a school district have come together because they're rethinking where, how, and why, for example, civic learning or STEM learning or something else happens. And it matches our own self-interest, which creates an opportunity for us to support that work. Or as Tyler described, the celebration that happens. Corporate funders or universities or others who, quite frankly, want to be part of that. And so I think it's really important as we think about financial vitality to think about the self-interests as to why people come to the table rather than selling them on the great things that we're achieving in the world. Think about how you can help someone else achieve their meaningful results for the reasons that they're coming to the proverbial table.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. Kata, I want to connect the question with this because you are convening a lot of different actors. And it's related with this. You mentioned what the ecosystem is doing, but you also make them see what they can get from the ecosystem. Can you explain us a little bit about how you are having those conversations with business leaders, with other actors, which could be the first step for an organization that didn't have the experience before, and which are the keys to make it sustainable and successful collaborations?
Sure. I guess I want to start by saying that it's not as simple and straightforward for us as a civil society organization that has not the funds guaranteed to sustain a network. And that's why we have to piggyback somehow in existing projects and find the way around to sell the idea to our funders that initiating a collaborative innovation lab will add value to whatever we're doing. I say this because I believe it's important to be creative, to catalyze the existing funds that you already have that perhaps are more traditional and more linear, and you have to respond to pre-established indicators, but we find a way to maximize those resources, and our initiatives, unfortunately, are or not unfortunately, because we find the way around, but it has a beginning and an end. What I mean is in the ecosystem, in the sense that we invite people to live together an experience of 8 months or something like that. It can vary. And we do a careful mapping of all the actors who could have an influence, one way or another, on a precise problem that we want to solve. We've done it in different cities, in different topics, with different results, of course. But we see a great value of embarking on a journey like this. We've done it in gender-based violence prevention. We've done it in youth violence prevention, in many diverse sectors. And we start with that mapping and then having individual conversations to better understand the ecosystem and the reasons why an organization like that would be interested in participating. We then embark in this journey where we have a constant agenda around connecting. We believe it's really important to build personal relationships with the people involved, to have a connection to a shared goal, to build trust, to ensure that something else can happen. Then aligning towards that shared goal is obviously fundamental, and starting to learn around the problem through very diverse views. It's very different to understand youth violence through the eyes of the police, of the church, of teachers, of the public sector, of private companies. And that really broadens your understanding and help people broaden the comprehension of the problem at stake. And I think this really grows the potential for collaborations and for people to get involved in issues that didn't see as their own before these processes. And then at the end of the journey, we embark in co-creating solutions, collaborative solutions for that specific problem. And of course, there's those are very particular solutions. Many of them have been very successful, but for me, the most important thing that remains, and that's why I say that the learning ecosystem becomes sustainable somehow, is that because you've experienced a journey, deep journey, visiting the communities, listening to the people that are affected directly, going to the companies to understand their perspective, like traveling together, builds the glue that holds those actors together. And we're seeing, even after 5 years of the journey established, new collaborations are emerging and the people remain together. For instance, right now with this crisis around funding, those actors are still looking for solutions together. How can we be more efficient? How can we collaborate around this? So it's like sowing the soil, in agriculture is the same as cultivating the social field. That's what we think we're doing, cultivating the social field and creating the connections for more collaborations to emerge.
Thank you, Kat. Tyler, that what Catalina mentioned is, remarkable, but it's not always easy. So there is a question in the chat that I want to ask you, which are the challenge of bringing together people from different sectors, especially if you have different sources of funding or different resources, because not all the time needs to be cash, could be in-kind resources. How you make that sustainable, how you establish the conversation, which is the kind of things that you need to clarify to make it work.
I think the obvious challenges are challenges that happen when you bring people from different spaces together in the same space. And so, like, I think the obvious ones are folks use different vocabulary. They have different goals. But I really love the different metaphors that Catalina presented around glue, creating glue, sowing seeds. And for both of these kind of metaphors, it's thinking about long-term sustainability, long-term partnership. And so honestly the biggest challenge, but I think a beautifully like opportunity for us is shifting things from being more transactional based to being relationship based. And so if something's transactional based, it might be a startup who's looking for a classroom to play test a product for 3 weeks and provide feedback. That's going to be very transactional based. However, if the head of that organization is part of this community and has developed relationships with these teachers, and that teacher during a unit in their class could take their students to see what a startup looks like in action and talk to the CEO of a startup, that's a relationship based like partnership. That's something that will sustain over time. And so both, I think the challenge, but the opportunity is to really transform transactional based connections to relationship based connections. And you do that in ways that you create relationships in everyday life. You grow connections on a personal level. You create conditions where people are coming together and being their authentic self and allowing them to put on their different hats. I'm a parent. I'm the head of an organization. I'm an aunt and uncle, and you really create ongoing opportunities for folks to just connect on a personal level.
And Gabby,
Thank
if I
you,
could
Tyler.
interject, I think it's
Please,
important
go
to
ahead.
interject. And the frustrating thing is, this is not a strategy that addresses the immediacy of financial chaos, right? And what Remake Learning, like our colleague Catalina in Colombia, has done over 19 years, right? And it need not be 19 years, but it's making it normal through those social events, through common professional development and learning, through common travel, through annual events, and especially then through the communications, to make it normal so that an entrepreneur and a museum exhibit designer and a teacher are in spaces together, so that when the time comes that they're in a working group thinking about STEM learning or AI or outdoor learning or whatever it might be, they just have the trusting relationship, and they can get right to the like, okay, how are we going to rethink how, why, and where learning happens? It's made normal, and it honestly does take some time to make that a normal thing and not transactional.
Thank you, Tyler. Greg, sorry, and Tyler. This is great. And it's connected with the questions that some of our members drop in the chat. I think, Kata, I'm going to do this question to you. How do you map your participants' journey in the program? And then after that, I'm going to share with Tyler and Greg. You can pick who will respond to that. How you ensure that there is a steady flow of capital from all the partners, and how to access to other sources of capital. But first, Kata, tell us a little bit about how you map your participants' journey.
Sure. Well, we start with the usual suspects, those organizations that have specific programs towards youth. And through them, we start conversations with them to identify an specific question or ambitious goal that we want to address together. Once we have that together, we start brainstorming around potential actors, making sure that we have actors from all the sectors, public, private, the academic world, and the civil society, but also individuals. Yes, it's important to have organizational representation, but for instance, for youth violence prevention, we said we cannot explore this question without having a young person who has been involved in armed gangs. So we make sure that that's represented. Who else? Organizations who have recruited young people. So we had former members of armed gangs to understand their strategies to recruit young people. What are the protective environments? Where do they move? Schools, teachers, come here, join us. Like trying to map how the young people experience his or her life in a daily manner. And we make sure to bring the system into this journey. I must say that we don't have a secured capital for all those actors to be involved. Like we have other mechanisms, like we don't pay them to be involved, or we don't guarantee that there's going to be funds for the collaborative initiatives that emerge. It's more listen, we have limited resources. Why don't we come together to imagine different ways to do this? And I think people get involved for various reasons. There's really, and we have been able to demonstrate, and we invest in communications to make this appealing and somehow aspirational, and people can realize that there's a deep learning in this process, a deep, deep learning. Because of the fact that we bring all these diverse actors, it's exciting for people to be part of this and to be able to get to know their city through different eyes. Colombia, unfortunately, because of the effects of the violence, is very segregated, and we live in bubbles. So the invitation to cross those bubbles and to build those bridges across sectors is very appealing. We also make it fun. We make sure that it's fun, that we create. For instance, I shared the last time that the first time that we invite people to join this is to cook together, and each one brings a different ingredient, and it's a symbolic ritual to show what will happen afterwards. We do field trips to the comunas, the shanty towns in Colombia, and we visit the companies involved too. So we really make it appealing, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to connect, to keep people. I forgot something about mapping. We also make sure that we invite people who are attractors, who are good connectors. That's really helpful as well. People want to be there if this person or this group is there. And sometimes in some projects, we do have some funds. We're starting right now in another city in Barranquilla, where they're asking us to replicate the model. Unfortunately, there's a fund that will be available for the emerging collaborations. But otherwise, it's more, what do you have? What do I have? How can we make this more effective and more efficient? Or let's find another funder and present a joint program together. Unfortunately, we don't have excess of funding, but it's more a creative way of creating transformative solutions. And as I said, yes, there are tangible programs that are sustainable with very good results. But for me, the most important thing about this approach is the relational capital that is built around this, the trust and the opportunity to collaborate and to learn from each other and to continue working together. Many opportunities arise after a process like this.
Thank you, Kata. And well, for Greg or Tyler, I don't know who wants to jump in, how we can invite other sources of capital and make this like a slow. Kata, share a little bit about, the creative way that they are using and some challenge. And I know that you have other experiences that are really interesting. So over to you.
Yeah, I will try, and then Tyler will fill in some gaps. Because I think it's important to describe, as Catalina just said, right? Remake Learning itself is not funding the core operations of these 800 member organizations. They're separately doing all of their fundraising, right? Remake Learning creates the conditions whereby collectively, as an ecosystem, we might think about the region as a learning campus. We, in part, have made ourselves lucky. And there's no doubt about that. We're fortunate to have philanthropic capital that seeded some of the initial work of Remake Learning and has remained patient in its support over nearly 2 decades. And to go back to those 5 C's, those 5 C's have been so critical because, for example, if we look at the idea of celebrating and what now is called Remake Learning Days, which this year will celebrate the 10th edition, it's honestly, at its core, it's a regional festival of learning spaces, right? That's been an on-ramp to attract corporate donors, public donors, private donors, because it's just honestly a product that's easier to sell. Same with the working groups, right? Those working groups are around particular subject matter, as you heard Tyler describe. It could be around STEM learning. It could be around civic learning. personalized learning, AI and learning. I mean, these are subject matters that are attractive in the moment and they're meaningful. I don't want to suggest that they're just opportunistic ways by which to raise funding, but they're meaningful to a broad spectrum of organizations. And so it's in those contexts then that companies or public donors or private donors say, let's collectively invest in this pool of funds so that we figure out how we're going to figure out AI and learning in this moment for our learning spaces. And so while there have been a handful of patient core funders for the core work, it's really been some of those strategies that have provided the on-ramp for more robust fundraising for Remake Learning itself, which then obviously goes to the bottom line of Remake Learning more generally. Does that make sense, Gabby? Yeah.
It makes, yes, totally. I don't know, Tyler, if you want to add something, or you, Kata, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I haven't mentioned a really important dimension of our approach and the methodology that we use. And it's that we believe that for systems to change and for colaboración enraizada, for deep collaboration to happen, we need deep personal shifts. We always tend to see the system out there, and we are the system. So really the opportunity of having a fractal of the system together in a deep learning journey the opportunity of having this fractal is a great opportunity to transform the system itself. So there's an important bet also in becoming better leaders, better listeners, better connectors. Like, we create the opportunities for us to learn how to collaborate, which is not easy. It requires a lot, letting go the ego as well, etc. So sometimes the collaborations can be even small, but that are leverage points that have enormous shifts. I wanted to highlight that and perhaps share small examples around one that we run around gender-based violence prevention, where we realized that there were some blockages around accessing justice by simply doing some training, improving the ways that again, I forgot the word, where the people go and put the legal complaint. So sometimes it's not the birth of huge new initiatives, but it's about how can we do this more efficient and how can we see the blind spots that we have, because we're always looking through our same framework. So I just wanted to share that personal transformation is really important, and that's a really interesting thing for people to keep connected. Like, people want to be there because of this, but also this leads to small shifts that have enormous impact.
Thank you, Kat. Tyler, I know that you have something to add, and I'm going to put a question on top for you that is in the Q&A app, which is, when you are engaging these private sector actors in the cross-sectorial collaborations, how you show them the value in participating in this process. Greg mentioned that you need to show other people the value that this initiative could have for them. How you do it, which is the way that you can show them dealing with the agendas that all these private sectors actors has, and also the corporative culture that they have.
I mean, we're almost 2 decades into this work, and so I think there has been a lot of infrastructure built around, like, creating what is needed for folks to regularly come together. So, I came into this role in 2020, and at this point, it doesn't require a lot of us going out to people and convincing them the value of being part of a learning network or a learning ecosystem. Oftentimes, folks, they have their own self-interest and they actually need something, and that's why they're coming into this ecosystem. And so if we're talking about kind of private sector, it might be anything from, a large corporation who has an outreach component, social mission in their organization, who they want to connect with schools. So they might want to send scientists from their paint manufacturing company to interact with young people. And by being part of an ecosystem, here are teachers all over the region that you can connect with. Or as I shared, it might be a tech startup who is creating a tech solution for classrooms, and they need to get their product in the hands of actual educators. And so really, I think like when you make it the norm, as Greg shared, folks have that own self-interest that they're bringing into the network. And when you create the conditions where we not only, allow you to bring your self-interest, we encourage you to bring your self-interest to the table. I think that's why people are coming into the network.
Thank you, Tyler. We have a few more minutes and a few other questions, but I also want to ask you for some tips. If I am an organization that never has an experience doing cross-sectorial collaboration or inviting private sector to our initiatives, which could be the first step, which could be the advice that you can give them if they want to start this journey of cross-sectorial collaboration and access to other partners and source of capital. Greg.
To me, the unexpected answer is to focus on the social things that make us human. It's both tactical. It's not rapid response, but it is the thing that's formed the relationships. It was Catalina describing those. To me, they sounded like potluck dinners and bringing ingredients and just getting people connecting over the food. Remake Learning started nearly 20 years ago over coffee and pancakes at a breakfast meeting by bringing together people who, for different reasons, had interests in the well-being of kids. Yes, it was teachers and librarians and social workers, but it was also gamers and artists and technologists. Finding those places that you might just invite people together over food and beverage begins to form the relationships that then I think allows people to notice that there are other people like them from totally different professions, totally different fields, totally different organizations that in some way are caring about the same thing, whether it's the reduction in violence or the dynamism of their learning environments. Because then once we're connected as people start to more comfortably say, what if? How might we? And I think we can't underestimate the importance of those social connections.
Thank you, Greg. Catalina, some advice.
No, I agree with Greg, and I would say maybe sharing some examples could spark curiosity around among different actors. I think we as social entrepreneurs and social change agents are sometimes too focused in doing. I think this is a huge blind spot that we have, and perhaps an invitation to pause and reflect is an interesting invitation for these times of chaos and so many things going on, and having deep conversations with potential partners and explore and being able to listen to new ideas and not be so obsessed on how can I continue doing what I've been doing, but rather pausing, opening the possibilities and inviting others to this idea could spark the interest and curiosity to embark on a journey like this.
Thank you,
We need to find
Tyler.
new ways of doing things.
It's true. We need to, because the panorama is not going to be the same anymore. Tyler, your tips.
I would just go back to the point I made earlier, shifting from a transactional mindset to a relationship-based mindset. And I think it is kind of a mindset shift. We get folks who reach out quite frequently who say, we have an intervention. It might be a tech tool, it might be a curriculum, and we love to present to your working group. And my feedback to them always is, well, it would make a lot more sense for you to be part of that community. It's an open community. You can go there, you can join, and you can make deeper connections that I think are going to yield a lot more of a return for you than just a quick couple-minute presentation in front of folks. And so that I think it is that mindset shift away from transactional to more relationship-based.
And Gabby, I look at the question in the Q&A about the challenges of engaging those private sector partners who have strict agendas and the corporate culture, right? Like,
Exactly.
You know, to Catalina's point, you know, social entrepreneurs, we do. Like, your job is not to convince the big multinational corporation to do X, right? Your best job is to connect with some people internal to that organization, connect with them about the thing that is the shared interest, and then let them be the ones who navigate their own internal culture to figure out how they can get their organization to be part of something, because as Catalina described, it's meaningful, there's buzz about it, it's exciting, and honestly, it's fun. Yeah.
You'll be surprised how lonely we all are in these processes. Like, people want to connect and want to explore new ways of doing. And I would add to the points Greg and Tyler have said that another tip would be learning to let go, learning to let control go. Sorry, I'm not very fluent. Because sometimes we're so obsessed with the own solutions that we've created that we don't open the possibility for new ideas to emerge. Like, if you want to embark in an initiative like this, you need to go without a specific agenda. Of course, a clear goal, but it's not to impose your way of doing or your programs or anything. No, it's opening the world of possibilities and letting go control, and letting go also your need to demonstrate your own impact, because it will be our impact. I was going to say something else, but I forgot.
Thank you, Catalina. And I think there's many insights from this session, and I want to connect them with the insights of the previous session. I know some of you has been there, others are here for the first time, but this is already our third session. And what we learned from now is the funding panorama change, and it's not going to be the same anymore. So we need to learn how to navigate that. And there are different ways of doing it. There are ways of learning how to connect with other sources of funding and do more creative funding, as crowdfunding on other individual funds. 67% of the funds around the world came from people, not from organizations, not from governments. So if you learn how to tell your story and how to connect with people, you will receive the support that you are looking for. Open your mind, as Kata, Tyler, and Greg say, to cross-sectoral collaboration and to let the control go. Open your mind and work with people that is not normally the people that we work with. And also be sure that if you connect with the people and you create an initiative that is interest, that has a clear goal, and that has this potential of connecting with the interest of others, you will receive support. That's for sure. It looks like very difficult, especially for the organizations that are struggling right now, but I'm happy to say that in the last weeks, I have received messages from some members that already connect with previous speakers or start their crowdfunding campaigns, their ambassadors campaign. They are creating collaboration with other members, and it's working. So I invite you to do the same. And I also want to invite you to our next session in these topics. We're gonna talk about Giving Challenge or Giving Campaign, which is another source of funds that is opening right now for all our members. Is an alternative method of fundraise, is for unstructured funds and reduce the dependence on public funding. So if you want to join to that session, will be on March 4. We will share the information soon. And we're going to share the recording of this session, the insights, the websites that Catalina, Gregg, and Tyler share. We will also share more resources that we have in our network for fundraising. Our learning and system change team developed a fundraising toolkit that is available for you. And we will also share the recording of the previous session. So we hope that all these materials, all these resources, and all this inspiration will help you to navigate the complex environment where we are right now. And I want to say thanks today to Catalina, Tyler, and Gregg for being with us and share with us all your experience in this session. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. See you in the next session.